Benjamin's trips to the town at the western edge of the forest usually ended in trouble. The townsfolk either avoided him or tried to drive him out with angry glares and profanity. But a little girl now lay in his arms, shocked and likely permanently damaged from witnessing the gruesome fate of her grandmother. Someone had to help her. He didn't need to do anything else. Just find someone who would take care of her, drop her off, and leave before things got messy. He slowed at the fork in the road before the final approach into town and set Red on her feet. He ran a hand over his brow and subconsciously toyed with his ear again. His primal instinct told him something was still wrong. Something more than nearing a town of people who hated him. He wrapped her tiny hand in his and tugged her gently down the road. She walked beside him but showed no reaction. At the edge of town, Ben found himself twiddling his ear again. This time he knew something was wrong. The deafening silence made that abundantly clear. He tugged Red closer to him. His ears perked as he listened for any sound, anything at all. The town usually filled with the sounds of shopkeepers shouting out their wares, drunken bards caroling in the streets with poorly tuned lutes, livestock squealing and calling as they were bought and sold. Nothing. He sniffed the air and detected a familiar odor, the same horrid smell that came off the woodsman when he chopped him with his own axe. A door flung open and grabbed his attention. A growling gray figure lunged out and sprinted toward Ben. The wolf picked up Red and leapt to the side to dodge the assailant. Its momentum sent it sprawling on the ground. As it took its time to recover, Ben saw two more hobbling out of the same building. Sounds of glass breaking and doors slamming open echoed from around town. More and more of those things converged on their location. They began to charge the moment they saw Ben and Red. Ben cursed loudly and ran back the way they came. What the hell is going on? This was once a bustling town of shops and busy patrons. Now it was filled with those horrible things. "Over here!" a voice called from under the trees near the fork in the road. Ben turned in that direction. A pale man in a fancy coat waved for him to follow. A large bandage stretched across half his face and covered one eye. "Come on!" The wolf looked back to see how close the monsters were. Too close. Ben rushed off to meet the mystery man, who turned and ran down the road and led him to the old limestone bridge. "Get across," the man shouted after making it to the other side. "What are you doing?" Ben called back halfway over. The stranger pulled out a glass orb with a luminous golden substance inside. "You'll want to stand back a fair bit." Ben ran past the man and turned, still cradling Red in his arms. The stranger tossed the object onto the center of the bridge where it shattered, scattering a golden cloud of dust over the worn stones. The stones that made up the structure floated apart and drifted up into the air like clouds. The creatures tried to follow them, but whatever held up the stones wouldn't hold them too. They plummeted into the swift-flowing, mud-banked river below. "That'll slow them down," the stranger said. "Let's get some more distance from them." He turned and ran down the road. Without another thought, Ben followed him. Was this guy some kind of wizard? It wouldn't be unusual in the kingdom, but Ben never thought he'd live to meet one. "What was that stuff?" "Pixie dust," the stranger replied. "It's rare, but worth it." He kept running. Finally, they reached the birch wood where the road split and headed east and west. Breathless and sore, Ben leaned against an old tree. He set Red down next to it, and the stranger stood nearby. They had gotten a lot of distance from the monsters that chased them out of town. "You should stay away from more populated areas." The stranger spoke in a deep tone that commanded attention. "This is happening everywhere." Ben struggled to speak as he gasped for breath. What were those things? The stranger turned away, so only the bandage was visible. "I don't know," he said slowly. "Some kind of ghoul, perhaps." Ghoul. And what did they do to the people in that town? Where did they go? The stranger groaned. "Seriously? Didn't you see how they were dressed? The fact that they resembled normal townsfolk? Those were the people." He turned to face Ben and gestured back down the road. "Something turned the townsfolk into those things. It's dead obvious." Ben was never one to think too much while running from trouble. He paused, remembering the encounter with the old woodsman earlier that day. "Don't dwell too much on it," the stranger spoke again, breaking Ben's train of thought. "They might as well be dead already." Ben grunted as he straightened up and stepped away from the tree. "Who even are you? And why did you help me of all people?" The stranger didn't answer right away. He took a moment to adjust the bandage on his forehead, then looked back at Ben. I am, or rather was, a member of the King's Royal Guard, Sir H.D. Umpty. He extended a hand to shake Ben's. Ben reached out and shook the offered hand. Benjamin, I trust you've heard of me at some point. So you're the wolf that's been terrorizing people around here? Ben brushed his head and toyed with his ear again, his tail curled around one leg. I'd rather not talk about that, he said, then changed the topic. Wait, if you're a royal guard, why are you here? Shouldn't you be with the king? Sir Umpty turned his face away again. The king has already been infected with whatever the ghouls are carrying. There's nothing else left to guard at the castle. His tone was calm and collected. As for helping you, the royal guardsman continued, you and that child are the first survivors I've seen since this started. Ben took Red's hand. Strangers always made him cautious. We were both alone in the dark forest. I heard her scream and came running. One of these ghouls attacked her grandmother. She's not responded to anything since. Sir Umpty glanced down at Red. Traumatic shock. You're protecting a child with a damaged mind. Honorable. So now what? Ben was about to add to his question when he heard something. The sounds of wooden wheels straining under weight on a rough path. He raised his hand to stop Umpty from answering his question and drowning out the sound. There's a wagon coming from that direction. He pointed up the road. It sounds like it's carrying something heavy. Without answering, Sir Umpty drew a saber from a sheath hidden under his coat. Just in case, he said blankly. A towering figure appeared over a small hill with the wagon Ben heard in tow. No beast of burden, the man pulled it himself. A bear sat in the wagon, upright and clothed in a motherly dress. At least Ben thought it was a man. The being was at least 7 feet tall, not including the towering hat he wore. It was crafted from brown leather, just like his trench coat and shoes. The wolf's eyes widened in shock. Despite appearing to articulate normally, every part of the man's body that should have been a straight line was not. Between the joints, his limbs bent and twisted like crooked tree branches. Even his feet were grossly misshapen. Ben and Umpty backed up to the tree line along the road to let this being pass. As he drew near, he took notice of them and stopped beside the road. Are you in need of assistance? The tall man's voice was deeper than Umpty's, but flowed more smoothly and seemed inviting. Who are you? Umpty called out, sword pointed at the man. And what do you want? He raised his arms to either side, his long, crooked fingers splayed to show no weapons. I'm just an old hermit who wants to lend a hand. As you can see, I have plenty of hand for everyone. The bear leaned over to look at Ben and Umpty. More survivors? She glanced back at the tall man who had been towing her in the cart. It seems so. He turned around to answer her, revealing an arched back before taking another step toward the wolf and guardsman. As you can see, I've already helped this other survivor. We will be taking refuge in my cabin at the edge of the kingdom if you want to join us. Ben and Umpty looked at each other. Ben's brow furrowed and he stepped forward. We'll take you up on your offer. The more of us who band together, the better our chances. Then come along. The man stood aside, inviting them to his cart. Let's move. Umpty sheathed his sword and marched to the cart while Ben picked Red up to join them.